Hey guys, my name is Ryan.
And my name is Miska.
And welcome to Overwatch Central. So it comes as no surprise to a lot of people that ultimates are probably one of the most important things in Overwatch. They are exceptional abilities. They can easily win you the game if used in the right circumstances. In the same vein, if you screw up some of these ultimates, you may even hand the enemy the advantage, even if you're on top at the moment. So in this video, we wanted to go over 5 heroes in particular and some of the problems that players have, common mistakes that people make with their ultimates. Before we start, do let us know if there are any ultimate mistakes that you could think of. Let us know in the comments below and see if they match up with what we've said. But let's get started.
So we're starting off with a very basic one, and then we'll get more in depth later on. There are some of these that are more common mistakes due to them being bad habits, and some people not realizing that that is the reason as to why their ultimates aren't as successful. But some of these are also more in-depth tips, or at least more complicated to explain, so do bear with us as some of these explanations can vary in length. D.Va's ultimate is one that around the time where it was implemented into the game, a lot of people fell for it as they weren't used to playing around it. Nowadays, a lot of players almost have like another sense for the D.Va ult and just hear the ultimate prompt and just run away indoors and sort of know where to hide and know the common spots where people tend to ult. And more importantly, the common ways that people tend to ult. One of the very common ways and mistakes that I wanted to bring up here is just flying straight up with your mech and pressing Q. This used to work way back in the day, like I said, but nowadays it's just not as effective. Except maybe when you're stalling, I guess. I'd like to think of it as cooking a frag grenade in other FPS games. Essentially, you pull the pin and you throw the grenade, and if you throw it just straight away, then maybe it'll just be there on the floor for a while, allowing enemies to run away. Whilst if you cook it for a while and just hold it in your hand after you pull the pin, and then throw it, it may explode right after impact, essentially. In Overwatch, you can compare this to ulting straight up to ulting in this way as D.Va as I'm showing here. Essentially letting the momentum of your mech carry the mech forward, and by doing that not revealing where you're ulting from and what your plan with your ultimate is. I feel like this works a lot better as D.Va. If I'm ever caught off guard by a D.Va ultimate, it is because they are doing this in a spot that I'm not expecting to be ulted from. Now I'm showing this on Hollywood in a spot where it's pretty obvious where the ult will land always, as the fight tends to be around this last checkpoint area. But there are many other spots on pretty much all maps, so just go wild with it. But remember, don't ult straight up, because it's rarely the most effective way of doing it.
So next on the list is Reinhardt, and specifically Earth Shatter. There are many mistakes made around Earth Shatter due to its very fragile nature, and there's a lot of psychological warfare going on at the same time. It's an incredibly strong ultimate with high combo potential, but it can be just countered by putting up a barrier of any kind in front of it, so it means that it's very tricky to use. For this list though, we wanted to go over how many players have one goal in mind when using Earth Shatter, when it comes to getting as many enemies as you can in your ultimate, instead of going after key targets. The example we have on screen is, instead of trying to line up the Earth Shatter to get as many people as possible, such as the 3 tanks on the right hand side, angling it towards the left and focusing more on the Ana, which is of course keeping everybody alive. You see this a lot with Grav as well, trying to get as many people into it as possible, but in some situations it's just important to focus down key targets, especially in Mercy when you think that they have res, or in Ana when they have nano boost. Even if you're just getting the one person in the Earth Shatter, it can be much more impactful than trying to get 3 people in it, but ultimately failing to kill any of them.
And onto our next hero, which is Soldier. And specifically blind ulting with Soldier, and some people don't realize that they are blind ulting. A thing I've heard quite a few times actually is that a lot of people justify ulting early by saying that they don't want people to see them and then hear the ultimate prompt. Now honestly, if you're ulting in a good position and you have maybe an Ana boost as well, or at least a well thought out plan about your ultimate, that ultimate prompt shouldn't actually matter that much. I'll show an example on screen of blind ulting early on Dorado. I don't really need to explain this, to be honest, it's very self-explanatory, and it's more something to constantly have in the back of your head. If you're new to Soldier, you might find yourself doing this, and I'm hoping that this video can sort of plant a reminder in your head that next time you're in game and you're playing Soldier, you'll think of this and you'll keep yourself from ulting too early and ulting blindly.
And now onto Zarya, a hero that has a very interesting ultimate that forces many decisions and reactions with the mistakes. With Zarya, we wanted to talk about forcing synergy and how this is a problem. Over-dedicating ultimates is a big problem, and it especially happens with Zarya ults, as it's one of the most common situations where this happens. Many times it comes down to communication and the heroes that you currently have on your team. What we tend to do to avoid this problem in particular is for the Zarya to call and decide how they want to go about their ult. The difference here is between saying, I have my Graviton, I'll ult next fight, or I have Graviton, on Tracer Let's combo Genji save your ult. When people hear the fire at will, that's a good sort of indication to maybe use their ultimates, but you don't want to end up in that situation where you completely team wipe the enemy, but you use 4 to 5 ultimates doing so. Try and synergize the Zarya with the Tracer Big Bang combo, and save the Genji ult for a Nano Blade. In reality, you don't need to dedicate more than 3 ults per engagement, because if you do, you're at a severe disadvantage for the next fight, especially if no ults were used by the enemy. So if you're playing Zarya, try and communicate what ultimates you want to see used. Otherwise, you might over-dedicate.
And next up, we have Lucio's Sound Barrier. Sound Barrier is essentially all about timing. The better timed that is, the more ults you can potentially bait out from the enemy and make them waste. With the requirement of timing though, comes the mistake of preemptive ulting. And I don't blame people making mistakes because of that. I've made them as well a lot of the time, and I still make them occasionally. But with Lucio's ult, it's all about a good mix between reaction and prediction. So you need to know what's coming your way. If you press the button for the in-game stats screen and sort of try to figure out what ultimates you're up against, you might know if you have to ult fairly early or if you have to wait for a specific cue. And this is where the mistake we've picked come in. In this case, it's about ulting too early with Lucio and ulting as you go in rather than as you've gone in and as you've engaged in a fight. This seems like a very obvious thing to say, but the thing is, where you draw the line between too early and just right can be kind of hazy sometimes. So when playing Lucio, you should actually analyze where you actually start taking damage and where your team is actually properly exposed, and use that information together with enemy ultimate prompts to decide when you should ult. For example, with Lucio here, it's very easy to just ult in this section right here, in the stairs essentially, or just before you come out. So not only are you wasting some of your own ultimate's duration, but you also failed to bait out any ultimates from the enemy team. Instead, if you just ultimate later and let your team take a little bit of damage, you might have the enemy use 1 or 2 ultimates before you use your Lucio ult, and you also get more duration out of your ultimate as you're now using it when you are out in the open rather than as you're moving out into the open.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Do let us know any common mistakes you see with ultimates, maybe something to do with the Mercy Res, the Genji Nano Blade, stuff like that. Heroes that we didn't necessarily cover. Let us know in the comments below. Real quick as well, I just wanted to let you know that our sponsors HyperX have just released their first gaming mouse, the Pulsefire. Do check that out. You can find the details in the description. We'll also probably be doing a giveaway sometime soon as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps out the channel. And until next time, take care. We'll see you then.